Chapter 6. The Chimp and Some Others. "What's the difference between an ape and a monkey?" asked Phil, as they paced the gravel path. "Sounds like a riddle," said Uncle. "It's not quite easy to answer. In a sense there isn't any difference, because an ape is a kind of monkey, just as a boy in the sixth form is a scholar, though he doesn't like to be reminded of it." "You mean the apes are the top form of monkeys?" "Yes, and the top form of all other animals, for they are the most nearly like men, and their intelligence is wonderful." After this introduction the children were at first a little disappointed. There seemed to be so much more house than ape. All they could see was a few long furred bundles in odd corners, separated from them by thick glass screens. "The chimpanzees and orangutans who live here are very valuable animals," said Uncle. "And because they are so like men, they are liable to get the same diseases, especially colds and influenza. So when visitors sneeze or cough, the glass screen acts as a protection, as well as sheltering the animals from drafts. Ah, that's better. He's awake after all." The chimpanzee, always spoken of hereafter as Mr. Chimp, had to some extent uncurled himself and was lazily scratching the back of his left ear with the tip of his right hind paw, though how he managed it they couldn't make out. The children became aware of two very bright brown eyes closely watching their every movement. Apparently Mr. Chimp liked the look of the party, for he condescended to come to the front of the cage and sit up so that they might see him better. "Oh, look at his face," said Alice. "Isn't he exactly like an old man?" "Thank you," said Uncle. "Don't forget I'm getting on in years." "Oh, he's not a bit like you," said Joan, reassuringly, as if afraid her friend had gone too far. "That's all right, but really I am quite prepared to look on Mr. Chimp as a friend and a brother." There was a flash in those bright brown eyes beyond the glass. Was it possible he understood? Then the wide, rounded, sensitive lips came closely together, and the nostrils quivered. Perhaps he was not so flattered as Uncle thought. "I could tell you scores of stories about chimpanzees," went on Uncle, "but they will do for another time. They are really most wonderful creatures, and can be taught all sorts of things, such as eating with knives and forks, drinking from a glass, folding their sheets and blankets." "Folding their sheets and blankets," repeated Joan. "I can't do that. At least Nurse says—" "Oh, bother Nurse," said Phil. He was really rather rude, but then Joan ought not, in his opinion, to have interrupted. "Yes, for they have been taught to live almost as we do." "They haven't got any sheets or blankets, though," broke Kitty. It was strange, Phil thought, that girls could be so interested in such trumpery details. "No, they are provided with nice clean straw here, which I am sure is much better for them. But do you know, if they liked and you gave them time, I believe they could count the straws in their beds. A chimpanzee named Sally, who lived in the zoo for many years and was a great favourite with children, would hand her keeper any number of straws he asked for up to 6, and sometimes up to 10. Once she made a mistake and passed 3, when she had been asked for 4. What do you think she did?" "Picked up another," said practical Wally. "No, that would have been to admit that she was wrong. She doubled one straw over so that it had 2 ends, and the 3 straws looked like 4. "Jolly cute," said Phil. "I want you to notice," said Uncle, "that the apes differ from most monkeys in having no tails. But it is in the expression of their faces and in their sensitive hands and feet that they most nearly resemble men. Now look at the orangutan." "What did you say the gentleman's name was?" asked Phil. "I have been spelling it out, but couldn't see how to pronounce it. Oh, the name's not as bad as it looks. It is a Malay term, and means literally man of the woods. The orangutan is found only in Borneo and Sumatra, and some of the natives are said to believe that the creatures really are men. It differs in several respects from the chimpanzee, but if anything, the upper part of the head is even more human. Their ears, too, are remarkably like ours, though the gorillas are even more so. The orang is chiefly distinguished by the long strands of reddish-brown hair on the shoulders and thighs. As you see, it is not very tall, about 4 feet, and the head is very big in proportion, sometimes a foot across. On the ground it looks an ungainly animal, but if you could see an orangutan swinging swiftly from tree to tree with its powerful arms, you would get a very different impression. It is a sort of king of the jungle, and although it looks so mild and gentle, scarcely any wild animal will dare to attack it. "Is it as clever as Mr. Chimp?" asked Alice. "Very nearly. It is certainly as artful. I have read that some sailors once had an orangutan as a pet. Being rather spoilt, it developed greedy habits and was always begging for food. When this was at last refused, it pretended to be so miserable that nothing was left but suicide, and threw itself over the side of the ship. The sailors were horrified and reproached themselves for their hardness of heart. But they were relieved when one of their number discovered that the cunning rascal had been careful to jump, so that he was able to catch the anchor chain and to hang in perfect safety. And now let me recommend you boys, when you are older, to read that fine book by R.M. Ballantyne, The Gorilla Hunters. It will tell you a lot about what is in some respects the most remarkable kind of ape, the fierce gorilla, who is as tall as a man and has been known to measure as much as 8 feet from finger to finger. It has a mighty chest and very powerful limbs, and as, unlike other apes, it possesses a pair of heels, it is able to stand and walk as men do, and in fact spends much of its time in an upright posture. Kitty was getting rather tired. She liked to see an animal while Uncle talked about it, and was disappointed when he said the zoo had just lost its last specimen, which meant going to Africa to see one, and then he was afraid it wasn't the sort of beast that would come when called. "Shall we hunt the leopard now?" asked Phil. "Directly. But if I remember rightly, there are a few wild beasts in this part of the grounds that you wouldn't like to miss. Only I must warn you that they're loose."